The Brotherhood of the Silent Blade. Chapter 9, Whispers in the Shadows. The forest stirred with subtle life as the Brotherhood prepared for their next move. The low hum of whispered voices blended with the rhythmic scrape of whetstones on steel and the crackle of hidden fires. It was a symphony of survival, the sounds of a group united by necessity rather than trust. Sir Aldric Lorne stood apart, his sword resting on his shoulder as he observed the camp. The flickering light of a central fire cast long shadows across weary faces and slumped shoulders. Each person carried the weight of survival in their stance, but not everyone carried it well. Bryn approached from the edge of the camp, her bow slung across her back and a faint smirk tugging at the corners of her lips. She moved with a quiet confidence that made the space between them feel smaller than it was. "You're brooding again, knight," she said, her voice light but edged with understanding. "Careful, or you'll wear a hole in the ground with all that pacing." "I'm not brooding," Aldric replied, though the furrow in his brow betrayed him. "I'm thinking." "Dangerous habit," Bryn said, stopping beside him. Her gaze swept across the camp, lingering briefly on Malrik as he issued sharp commands to a group of scouts. "Let me guess, still chewing on the idea that someone in here wants us dead?" Aldric's eyes followed hers, tracing the movements of those around him. Every glance, every whispered exchange seemed like it could hold hidden meaning. "If they knew where we were before, they'll know again," Aldric said finally. "It's only a matter of time." "And you think it's one of us," Bryn said, her tone careful, the playful edge gone. "Don't you?" Aldric countered, meeting her gaze. Bryn tilted her head slightly, considering his words. Her gaze flicked to Jory, who was leaning against a tree and chatting animatedly with a scout. "It could be anyone. Or it could be no one. Malrik doesn't trust easily, and that paranoia has a way of bleeding into the rest of us." "Paranoia saves lives," Aldric said, his tone firm. "Sometimes," Bryn replied, her voice softening. "But it also gets people killed." The Brotherhood moved at dawn. The forest paths forced them into single file, their steps muffled by the damp earth and the soft rustle of leaves. Scouts led the way, their forms blending seamlessly with the shadows as they disappeared into the underbrush. The rest followed in practiced silence, their weapons ready but concealed. The plan was straightforward: ambush a supply caravan en route to the king's garrison in Redwater. The supplies were vital, but the message was more so a reminder that the Brotherhood would not be crushed. Thane Varro fell into step beside Aldric, his usual smirk tinged with unease. "You've got that look again," he said, keeping his voice low. "What look?" Aldric asked, though he already suspected the answer. "The one that says you're about to throw yourself into a fight that'll probably get us all killed." Aldric glanced at him, his expression neutral. "It's not that kind of fight." "Good," Thane replied, his smirk widening. "Because I'd like to keep my head attached a little longer." Behind them, Jory Kestrel's voice floated forward, as chipper as ever. "If we're throwing ourselves into a trap, at least let me write something poetic about it first. The Brotherhood's last stand has a nice ring to it." "Shut up, Jory," Bryn called back, though the faint amusement in her tone betrayed her. "Save your poetry for when we're dead." Jory grinned, his voice exaggeratedly cheerful. "That's the spirit, Bryn. Always looking on the bright side." The ambush unfolded with a precision that spoke to the Brotherhood's experience. The supply caravan wound its way through the forest, the guards on edge but unaware of what waited for them. Malrik signaled from his perch in the trees, his hand dropping like a hawk's wing, and the Brotherhood descended. Aldric's sword flashed in the morning light as he charged into the fray. The first guard fell before he could cry out, Aldric's blade cleaving through his defenses with practiced efficiency. The chaos erupted around him as arrows rained down from the trees and the shouts of soldiers mingled with the clash of steel. The Brotherhood moved like shadows given form, their strikes quick and lethal. A guard lunged at Aldric, his spear thrust aimed at Aldric's chest. Aldric sidestepped, his blade sweeping up to knock the weapon aside before driving forward. The guard crumpled, and Aldric turned, his senses attuned to the chaos around him. A flash of memory pulled at the edges of his mind, sharp and intrusive. He was back in the king's war room, the heavy oak table laden with maps and markers. The king stood beside him, his hand resting heavily on Aldric's shoulder. You are my sword, Aldric, the king said, his voice steady but weary. The edge that cuts through the darkness. I trust no one more. The memory shifted, the warmth of the king's words replaced by the cold of Greystone Keep. Aldric's chains bit into his wrists, the iron heavy with betrayal. Lord Ranth's voice echoed in his ears, smooth and insidious. Justice must be served, Ranth had said, his tone a mockery of righteousness. Even a knight cannot stand above the law. The flashback ended as an arrow whistled past Aldric's ear, snapping him back to the present. Bryn was at his side, her bow drawn and her eyes sharp. She loosed another arrow, the shaft finding its mark with deadly precision. You're slow today, she said without looking at him, her tone casual despite the chaos. Thinking, Aldric replied, his voice clipped. Stop that, Bryn shot back. It'll get you killed. By the time the last guard fell, the forest was eerily silent. The Brotherhood moved quickly, stripping the caravan of supplies and setting fire to what they couldn't carry. Smoke curled into the air, a dark beacon that would not go unnoticed. Malrik stood at the center of the clearing, his sharp eyes surveying the scene. Aldric approached, his sword still in hand. This won't stop them, Aldric said, his tone grim. It's a victory, but it's not enough. Malrik turned to him, his expression cold and calculating. It's not supposed to be enough. It's supposed to remind them that we're still here. Aldric's jaw tightened, his frustration barely contained. And what happens when they come in force? When 73 of us aren't enough to stop them? Malrik's smirk returned, sharper than before. Then we remind them why shadows are more dangerous than armies. As the Brotherhood melted back into the forest, Aldric lingered at the edge of the clearing. The smoke from the burning caravan stung his eyes, but he didn't turn away. Bryn joined him, her expression uncharacteristically soft. You're worried, she said, her voice quieter now. I'm always worried, Aldric replied. But this feels like a delay, not a victory. Bryn nodded, her gaze distant. Then we make the next move before they do. Aldric didn't respond. Instead, he turned and followed her into the shadows, the weight of the past pressing heavy on his shoulders. The Brotherhood was still fighting, still surviving. But Aldric couldn't shake the feeling that survival might not be enough. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.